Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophet Samuel 1, chapter 5, in a clear and simple way, step by step. I am so absolutely thrilled to guide you through this today because, let's be honest, we are looking at a truly fascinating, action-packed chapter of biblical history. It is just an incredible narrative. We are going to strictly follow the text here. We'll be breaking down the who, the what, the where, and the why, making sure every single detail makes perfect sense to you. Now remember, there's no outside symbolism here, no deep mystical interpretations or Kabbalah, just the pure, raw facts of the story exactly as they unfold in the Hebrew text. We are going to explore the pure, plain meaning, the Pashat, going verse by verse, so you get a full, comprehensive understanding of these events.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's a fundamental question that really sets the stage for everything that follows in this chapter. I want you to imagine the ultimate military triumph. You haven't just defeated your enemy on the battlefield, you have literally taken their most holy, powerful artifact right out of their hands, and you bring it home. It's the ultimate trophy of your superiority. You know, in the ancient world, capturing an enemy's sacred object was the definitive, undisputed proof that your forces, and by extension, your gods, were supreme. But what if that trophy isn't actually a captive at all? What if instead it's a Trojan horse of divine proportions? Well, this is exactly the terrifying situation the Philistines find themselves in, and as we're going to see, their supposed ultimate victory is about to turn into an absolute, unmitigated nightmare.
To properly set the scene, let's look at verse 1 to establish exactly where we are in the story. In the previous chapter, the Philistines fought against Israel and won a massive, crushing victory. During that battle, they captured the Ark of God, which in Hebrew is called the Ekron ha-Elohim, from a place called Ebenezer. And now they've just brought it back to their own territory, specifically to their major city, Ashdod. Now, Ashdod is one of the 5 major Philistine capital cities located right near the Mediterranean coast. Our goal today is to walk through exactly what happens next, verse by verse. We are going to clarify what transpires as this incredibly sacred object enters foreign hostile territory and step by step begins to completely dismantle the Philistines' sense of victory.
Right, so looking at the text itself, this is the original text from the first book of Samuel. Our explainer today is grounded strictly in these sources, the original Hebrew Tanakh, supported by the plain English translations. Like I mentioned, we are focusing purely on the Pashat, that straightforward, literal meaning of the text. By sticking really closely to exactly what is written, we can appreciate the raw power and the incredibly clear sequence of events without getting bogged down in complicated theories or deep symbolism. The text itself tells an undeniably compelling story of power, panic, and consequence all on its own. And don't worry, we will clarify any complex Hebrew terminology or ancient names as we go along so nothing is confusing.
And this really brilliantly illustrates the overall structure of chapter 5. The Ark of God doesn't just sit quietly in one place. It actually goes on their sort of catastrophic geographical tour of the Philistine territory, leaving absolute devastation in its wake. It starts right in Ashdod, where it causes intense theological humiliation and physical disease. Then the Philistine leadership tries to solve the problem by moving it to Gath, where the plagues just escalate into massive panic. Finally, it arrives in Ekron, where the consequences hit a deadly climax. Keeping this 3-city journey in mind, Ashdod, then Gath, then Ekron, will help you perfectly track the narrative as we read through the chapter step by step.
Section 1. Dagon versus the Ark, a clash of gods. So jumping into verse 2, the Philistines take the captured ark and they place it directly into their own temple. Now, to fully grasp the stakes here, we really need to know who Dagon is. Dagon was the chief deity of the Philistine people. He was represented by a massive, imposing physical idol, a giant statue standing proudly inside this grand temple in Ashdod. By taking the Ekron ha-Elohim, the Ark of the God of Israel, a God who, remember, is invisible and strictly forbids any physical idols, and placing it right at the feet of their giant carved idol Dagon, the Philistines are making a profound, arrogant statement. They are visually communicating, "Our God defeated yours. Your God is now nothing more than a subordinate trophy sitting in our temple."
But nature, or rather divine power, has a way of flipping the script. Notice the almost dark humor in the sequence of events over the next 2 days, detailed in verses 3 and 4. On the very first morning, the people of Ashdod wake up, they go to their grand temple, and what do they find? Dagon is fallen flat on his face right before the ark. It literally looks exactly like their God is bowing down in submissive worship to the God of Israel. So what do? They manually pick their heavy, lifeless idol up off the floor and awkwardly prop him back into his place of honor. But the next morning, things are significantly worse.
Dagon is on his face again, but this time it's not just a fall. His head and the palms of both his hands are completely cut off, lying severed on the threshold of the temple doors. Only his heavy, useless torso is left intact.
This is a total theological disaster for Ashdod. The severing of the head and the hands is highly symbolic in the ancient text. It essentially means Dagon has lost all his wisdom and his power to act. He is completely, undeniably helpless. Verse 5 explains the lasting cultural impact of this massive humiliation. Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any that come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod unto this day. The Hebrew word used for threshold here is mifton. Because Dagon's severed head and hands touched this mifton, the spot became an absolute taboo. It became a cursed area that Philistine priests actively avoided stepping on for generations. It was a permanent scar on their religious pride.
All right, Section 2, the plague spread, from the temple to physical reality.
Having entirely humiliated the Philistine god, the text now shifts from the temple out into the streets. Verse 6 says, "But the hand of the Lord was heavy upon them of Ashdod, and he destroyed them and smote them with emerods." In Hebrew, the phrase used here is kaveda yad Hashem, the hand of God was heavy, and he smote them with emerods. The original Hebrew word here relates to tekorim or olophalum, which modern plain English translations describe as tumors, severe boils, or hemorrhoids. What you need to deeply understand here is that this was a sudden, severe, and incredibly painful physical outbreak afflicting the regular people. It wasn't just a natural seasonal sickness going around. The text is explicitly, unmistakably clear that it was a direct, active divine punishment.
And you know, the people of Ashdod are not foolish. They connect the dots immediately. In verse 7, they look at their shattered idol on the temple floor. They look at the severe tekorim, these painful tumors breaking out all over their bodies. And they have a sudden moment of total clarity. They say out loud, "The ark of the God of Israel shall not abide with us, for his hand is sore upon us and upon Dagon our God." They finally realize they haven't captured a prize at all. Instead, they have brought a devastating, unstoppable force directly into their own home. They recognize the divine source of their suffering, and they decide right then and there that the ark has got to go.
Let's move to verse 8 and see how this builds. Because rather than doing the sensible thing and sending the ark back to Israel, the lords of the Philistines hold a political council, and they vote to simply pass the buck. They move the problem to another Philistine city, Gath. But as verse 9 details, this is a terrible miscalculation. The very moment the ark arrives in Gath, the heavy hand of the Lord turns against that city too. The Hebrew text says it created a mehumah gedolah, which translates to a very great panic or discomfiture. The plagues just escalate dramatically here. The tumors break out on literally everyone in Gath, from the youngest and smallest citizens all the way up to the oldest and greatest leaders. Nobody, absolutely nobody, is spared from the heavy hand of God. Moving right along, Section 3. Panic in Ekron, the climax. So the leadership in Gath quickly realizes they made a massive mistake. What do? They try the exact same failed strategy. They pack up the ark and they ship it off to a third Philistine city, Ekron. But as we read in verse 10, the people of Ekron see this thing coming and they don't even wait for the plagues to start. They immediately cry out in absolute raw terror. They shout, "They have brought about the ark of the God of Israel to us to slay us and our people." You see, the news of the broken idol in Ashdod and the mehumah gedolah, that great panic in Gath, had clearly traveled incredibly fast. The citizens of Ekron know exactly what this sacred object brings, and they are utterly, rightfully terrified of it entering their gates. This widespread, undeniable panic forces immediate action. Verse 11 describes how they urgently gather all the lords of the Philistines together yet again. But this time is different. They aren't voting on which of their own cities to punish next. Listen to this powerful, desperate plea from the people of Ekron to their rulers. "Send away the ark of the God of Israel, and let it go back to its own place, that it slay us not and our people." Think about that for a second. The arrogance from the beginning of the chapter is completely and totally vaporized. This plea represents a complete and utter surrender by the Philistine people.
And honestly, they had good reason to surrender that quickly, because verses 11 and 12 describe the absolute climax of these consequences. Even as these leaders are meeting to discuss it, a deadly destruction is already spreading throughout Ekron. The text emphasizes that the hand of God became very heavy there. It was suffocating. The men who didn't die outright from the initial wave were violently struck with the techorim, those awful tumors we talked about. The suffering is so intense, it's so widespread, and so utterly overwhelming that verse 12 concludes by telling us, Vata'al za'akat ha'ir hashamayim, the cry of the city went up to heaven. The Philistines' proud military victory has fully and completely dissolved into an unbearable nightmare.
Okay, Section 4, Key Ideas to Understand. Let's synthesize what we've learned.
Now that we have walked through the text thoroughly, verse by verse, let's step back and look at the massive 180-degree shift in the Philistines' perspective. They started chapter 5 in a state of immense pride and superiority. Their initial belief was that they had completely dominated the Israelites and subjugated Israel's God, claiming the Ark as this magnificent permanent trophy. But the final realization by the end of the chapter is the exact polar opposite. They realize they are entirely at the mercy of this God's power. They go from proudly displaying the Ark at the feet of Dagon to desperately screaming at their lords for it to be removed from their territory. So the crucial point is this profound irony that is built directly into the text itself.
Section 5. Lessons and Chapter Recap. Before we trace the Ark's path one last time, let's look at the practical life lessons here. What can we actually learn from this specific text to improve ourselves? First and foremost, we learn the immense danger of arrogance. The Philistines genuinely believed that because they won a temporary military battle, they could somehow control the divine. They thought they could literally box up true power and own it as a trophy on a shelf. This teaches us deep, necessary humility in our own lives. It serves as a powerful reminder that our human victories and our worldly successes might not be what they seem. We must remain humble and realize that we should never proudly prop up our own idols, whether that means our wealth, our social status, or our own ego, against ultimate truth. True power simply cannot be manipulated or owned by anyone. Keeping those incredibly important lessons of humility in mind, here is the clean, structural flow of the text's narrative arc one last time. First, we had the setup in Ashdod. The ark goes into Dagon's temple and the Philistine idol is repeatedly thrown down, ultimately losing its head and hands, which physically proves the supremacy of the God of Israel over their local deity. Second, the escalation. The ark is moved to Gath, where severe physical plagues, the techorim, break out among the entire population, causing massive, unprecedented panic. And third, the climax. The ark finally arrives in Ekron, sparking immediate terror, deadly plagues, and a completely unified demand from the Philistine citizens to send the ark back to Israel, where it belongs.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought to ponder, based on the plain text. The Philistines technically won the physical, military battle in the previous chapter, but if their captured prize single-handedly humiliates their chief god, severely plagues their citizens, and forces their entire leadership to literally beg for mercy and return the object, who was truly in control the whole time? Thank you for learning with us. If this helps you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.